everyone has their own scale of what they view as being competitive/casual.
Distraction makers.
So we recorded a video recently that was talking about asking the question basically if Commander is actually casual.
Is that the one that people got mad at us?
No, that was the other one.
They're all blurring together.
One of the, I guess, misconceptions in that video was what casual means.
Yeah. And a lot of people said that, people were mad at us in that video.
They're mad at us in every video.
I know. They said that was the video that people were saying we were wrong because Commander is actually casual and we're just not doing Rule 0. And,
right. So some of the sort of argument that was coming up was that casual is sort of something that is defined by the players. It's vibes. It's a gameplay philosophy by the players.
And in a way, you're not wrong.
Right. That is part of it, of course.
Yes.
However, there is a way to design a game that is more casual than other games.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Gavin from the editing room here. Just wanted to clarify our views on Rule 0 and sort of the thesis of this video. So the real issue we're seeing with Rule 0 is that it leaves a bit too much up to interpretation in the hands of the players. So one player might say something is casual or is not too competitive, and when other players might not agree, and it's pretty hard to navigate that system. We kind of see this with players trying to come up with what the power level of their deck is, and everybody saying a 7. So we're sort of trying to discuss a potential solve for that kind of an issue that could be created within the systems of Magic. The other thing with deck building, which is probably the first thing that would come to mind in terms of a way for players to customize the play experience, is that is only customizing it for you, right? You're only sort of able to put restrictions in deck building on yourself. You can sort of Rule 0 as a group, come up with some deck building restrictions. That's probably the best way to do this ad hoc, but we think that there's probably a better way that designers could facilitate this interaction so that players aren't left to sort of interpret these things on their own. Hopefully that clears things up a little bit. Back to the video.
Obviously, we can see this in things like Chutes and Ladders and chess. Those games are polar opposites in terms of the amount of luck and skill involved in the game.
Right.
Before we talk about how systems can create casual games, if you like our videos, like and subscribe. Also, this video has been brought to you by
the time this video comes out, my Kickstarter should be live for my Playmat series. You can find the link down below to go to the Kickstarter. That should be live, and if you want to support me, you can get one of the Playmats, or you can get all 5 of the Playmats.
Back to the video.
Now, you could make the argument, like I would make the argument, that Chutes and Ladders isn't a game. But let's say it is a game, all right?
It's an experience.
It's an experience. Can you play Chutes and Ladders competitively?
You could try.
You could try. You could get mad about it. I don't know. Right. You could try really hard to roll that dice correctly.
Right. Yeah.
Technically, if you want to look at dice rolling as a skill, then sure.
Yeah. That's a skill.
Trying to land it on the right one every time.
So for us, when we're talking about designing a game that is more casual, one thing we always like to consider is the amount of luck versus skill in the game. And at this point, we'll have a video out that's about luck versus skill. That's the next one in the queue, so it should be out.
All right.
But we should have refer back to that video in terms of we'll just sum up a little bit here in terms of what that luck and skill are not polar opposites. It's more that luck reduces the returns that a player gets from skill.
Yeah.
Which means that you're adding noise to the data collection of how many games need to be played to determine who is the more skilled player.
Right.
And the more luck that a game has, the more luck a game has, the more games will need to get played before you'll be able to sort of determine who is the more skilled player.
Right.
As long as the game includes some amount of skill and luck. The idea that casual is a mindset and not a design choice is sort of not true. There are things you can do in a game systems to make the game more casual.
Right. It's not that you can't play something casually with that mindset in mind. You can, for sure. But someone that's going to play chess casually versus playing against someone that is not playing casually or playing. It's not like a switch. It's not binary, right? It's not just you're playing casually or you're playing competitively. Everyone has their own scale of what they view as being competitive/casual. And so you might think that you are playing chess in a casual way. Someone else might think they're playing chess in a casual way, but one of you is much more competitively minded than the other person.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, so maybe sort of our definition of casual would be a game in which players of various skill levels can have compelling games against each other.
Right.
In compelling meaning like, exciting or fun or interesting or any of the above, something that is a reason to maybe play the game again.
Yeah.
And so, when we look at ways to do this, introducing randomness and luck is really the quintessential way to do this. We can look at I think one of the best examples of this, and you can put this within the same game potentially as long as you give players the ability to kind of customize the level of luck versus skill that they want. Mm-hmm. Smash Brothers is a perfect example of this. Yeah. So when we look at Smash Brothers, competitive Smash Brothers is played in a very particular way. It's played 1v1, it's played with no items, and it's only played on maybe just one stage or a handful of stages that are basically symmetrical.
Right. No craziness that happens on the stage, no falling blocks or floors or anything like that.
Right. And then so we leave it into the player's hands in terms of how, the gradient of how luck-based versus skill-based they want that game to be.
Yeah.
And on the extreme other end, we have all of the items turned on, we have 8 players playing at once, and we have some level that does all kinds of crazy stuff and explodes and things change, and it's very chaotic. There's a lot of luck involved in terms of where you are at any particular moment that something's about to happen.
Yeah.
And I think if we look at Commander, one of the things that we can kind of offset some of the sort of skill that is rewarded by playing the game would be something like Plane Chase, honestly.
Yeah.
Is that you're introducing another layer of variance, another layer of randomness and luck into the Commander as a format.
Yeah. And it's primarily that, it's something that is completely out of players' hands that still interacts with the game system without having to abruptly change anything. What's nice about Plane Chase is that you can show up ready to play Commander, similar to how you could show up ready to play Smash Brothers, but instead you're deciding, okay, we're going to put all the items on. And then that is just, okay, well, we're going to play Plane Chase.
Yeah.
Meaning we're going to have this random thing. It's going to happen every now and then. It's going to affect the game in this way that's out of our control, and it's going to be wild and fun and whatever.
So another comment that players are bringing up in terms of why Commander is casual is in that there's a lot of inherent variance in the fact that there's 4 players playing the game.
Right.
I suppose you could say that it makes it more difficult for you to understand any potential play your opponents might have because there are so many other players.
Right.
But that, again, just raises the skill ceiling. It doesn't, it probably makes the game more competitive.
I was going to say, I think that people are mixing up the fact that you can play in a casual way. It could be viewed on a competitive scale as a suboptimal play, but you are deciding this is a fun casual environment. I'm going to attack this guy because it would be funny, or it's politicking or whatever. And yes, but you are then going in, that is still a competitive game that you are choosing to play with a casual mindset. And that's okay, because you could be playing at a table where everybody is deciding, oh, we're also all playing casually. But again, it's that sliding scale where you're all playing casually, but one person's like, I got Ristic Study. So,
right. Yeah. And I think that what is so interesting about, sort of pointing to the number of players at the table as being a thing that would make the game more casual is that, yes, it increases the vectors of interaction that are possible. However, there still is an optimal play.
Right.
And that optimal play is still able to be deduced by you before you do a thing. It's just much more complex to do it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean no one can do it. Well, and you'll notice too that why you want to be the second person to try to win the game and everybody's used their interaction is now you have shrunk the possibility space small enough that it's more likely you'll be able to win because people have already spent their resources and their mana against other players. So you have less to account for. You have less to navigate through in order to win the game. So there is this sort of competitive optimization of give and take in the level of possible interaction, and being able to attempt to win the game when that is at its lowest point is a skill. Is not casual. Right. It's kind of the opposite. But yeah, I do think that I don't know. I guess like you could point to this as, well, if you don't care about that stuff, like you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is more casual because you're not thinking about it because the possibility space is too large.
Right. It's kind of like you could not think about getting better at chess. You could not think about improving your chess moves, but it doesn't suddenly mean that that's not what the game might be encouraging you to do, right? Because overall, when you're playing a game, there's a particular objective. You might have your own objective, right? Your own objective might not be to win at that game of chess. It's just to destroy their bishop with your queen or something like that, right? For whatever reason. You're deciding if you do that, that's a victory to you. But overall, the game's overall interactions and objectives are centered around that particular win condition. And so everything you do and the end point of the game is at that point. So anything that gets you to that point quicker or more effectively is going to be considered an optimal play, which is going to lead towards more of a competitive environment.
Right. Yeah. So part of also what we end up talking about in terms of randomness is that there's input and output randomness. Input randomness being randomness before you're making a critical decision, and output randomness being randomness after you've made a decision. Randomness in the outcome, basically. Yeah. And so neither one of these necessarily leans in a competitive or casual direction. However, output randomness tends to be less preferred by competitive players. You can still hedge against that randomness and still use that in a competitive context, but that's usually the one that ends up leaning more towards a casual audience.
Right. The other thing that I think that doesn't get talked often enough about amongst designers or design enthusiasts, I think, is the integration of flavor. Because I think that what ends up happening when you start moving towards a more casual focused game, where the objective of the game is meant to be more light, it's not meant to be more as a competitive format, you're able to actually get more effectiveness with flavor and lean more into that with your mechanics. And so looking at something like D&D, I think is a really interesting example of this, that like in D&D, there's a lot of decisions that players end up making not because it's necessarily the most optimal play. Mm-hmm. And you could look at D&D from a competitive mindset in a way.
Yeah, some like the kind of original Dungeons and Dragons was played a bit more competitively. It wasn't really like, you're playing against other players to like win. It's more like this dungeon is very challenging and I'm trying to beat the dungeon.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that there's plenty of opportunities for players in that case, because I think it's just the way that the system is sort of encouraging players to explore in different ways, to role play and stuff like that. The things that it facilitates players to do, I think, is encouraging players to just try things for what feels like it might tell a better story, because it's allowing the possibility to tell that story.
Well, and the incentive structure of D&D is vastly different than the incentive structure of
the
Magic,
incentive is not necessarily to win, right? It sometimes is okay for you to just go out guns a-blazing and die because that's something that sounds fun to you.
Sure.
Or it sounds cool, or it's a neat story or something like that.
And a lot of the sort of incentive structure of D&D is just to tell the best story.
Right.
And one of the ways that D&D helps facilitate that is with output randomness. This is why you can miss in D&D, by the way. Yeah. Whatever, we don't have to get into it. But one of the reasons why you can miss in D&D is because missing tells a better story. If you always were able to attack something and hit it, you're going to have sort of the same outcome every time.
Right.
And that you will deal damage. Maybe there's a varying level of amount of damage you're going to deal, but so many interesting story hooks happen when you try to attack something and miss.
Right.
Especially in critical moments, specifically.
Yeah.
So I do think that there could be one, you could try to realign some of the incentive structure in Commander to be more about telling a better story than winning the game necessarily. And I think that's something that casual players try to do in their groups.
Right. We've gotten a lot of comments from people that have basically said that we're not playing Commander correctly, and that instead we need to be telling the better story with it, without considering that there's different player archetypes. I play Commander very differently than the way that you play Commander, but we're all in the same pod together, and if we all have different sort of incentives or what we personally get more out of the game, then whatever. You
right,
know?
and ultimately, like rules for a game are facilitating social interaction. Right, they are an agreed upon experience that everyone sort of has come together to play under, and it's almost giving sort of like a third party to point to for players to say, no, like what I'm doing is within the rules. This is how the game is supposed to be played. Those kinds of things. And so when you don't have an incentive structure that incentivizes telling a good story, there's nothing in the rules to point to do that.
Right.
Now you can rule zero that in your own groups and things, but you know, us as game designers, coming from the perspective of making a game that then we we don't want to pass that responsibility off to the players. We want to create a system that facilitates the type of experience we're trying to create so that players don't have to fill in those gaps. Right. So these are all sort of things to consider if you're trying to design a game that is more casual. Luck versus skill. Basically, the more luck that you have, the more likely it is that players of various skill levels can be able to have compelling games against each other. This is something that needs to be in balance with how much luck a more competitive player will allow or be okay with. Competitive players tend to not be as accepting of a ton of luck in the game than casual players.
Right.
But as long as your game is not necessarily meant for a tournament scene, I don't think you really necessarily need to work it to worry about it.
Yeah.
But I think the best option is to put the tools in the hands of the players in a way that something like Smash Bros does, where players can choose the level of skill versus luck that they want.
Yeah, I mean, and even to bring it back to Commander, that might even be, that's probably a decent rule zero for people to go back to is, and this is a common one that I think people tend to lean towards, which is you end up adjusting the deck construction in that way. That's essentially coming to the table, but understanding, or, you know, we talked about Plane Chase. Plane Chase is another example of that, but basically coming to the table with the understanding that, oh, we're going to play with these cards, right? I think this is something that Unstable Sets did really, really well.
Yeah.
Coming to the table knowing you're going to play Magic, but you're going to play wacky Magic.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a whole nother format that we actually have not talked about that much on this channel, which is Cube. And Cube is really good at creating a rules structure through the cards that you've chosen to include in the cube to create a play experience.
Someday we will play Cube. We promise.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. Just give us like one more year.
Maybe we'll do Foundations. Is it a cube?
It might be.
I don't know.
350 cards.
I'm
That's
worried.
enough for a cube?
I'm worried there's duplicates.
Isn't that still a cube? You can't do duplicates.
Well, you're not
do
supposed to.
Really?
Yeah, you're supposed to do one copy of everything. But
Yeah. Whatever. Who says?
yeah, I'm sure you could probably play it as a cube.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool.